I am delighted to be here. And let me just say, I have to say this because she probably don't know it, but one of my heroes, my heroines, is Attorney Bella Abzug, who is seated to my immediate left and to my right. Our lives crossed some 30 years ago. She was a young attorney. She was, and still is, an intergenerational advocate, not just women of one particular age group, but young girls on all the way up. And one of these days, all of us will get all the way up. Is that a fact? She was interested in education, and she was working in Westchester County trying to get school books for children, school books that was outdated. She was totally confident, and I like that very much because at that point, my life had been totally shaken. But more importantly, she has always been a doer. And she spoke out against abuses to women very early on. And women who had been sitting in the corner thinking about these things and praying to God that one day all of this will be lifted. There was this woman out there speaking about abuses that gave confidence to a whole generation of women, and we should never forget those who blazed the trail and who led the way, should we? To Joyce Seiler, who said this was a very simple kind of, come speak 5 to 10 minutes, don't worry about it. When I get back to the college, I have something for her. Let me just say, developing, shaping, and enriching women and families to ensure stronger communities across the breadth of this country should not be left to a few women. We overwork our leaders, do we not? We overwork them, they burn out, and we step over and keep going and keep complaining. Now, one of the things is that I have always wondered, since women, regardless to ethnicity, have a concern about their families and their children, do they not? One of the things we find is that the history is not always clear. So that one would read history books and probably would not understand that more than half of the youngsters that Attorney Bella Abzug was talking about having textbooks were non-white. It seems that this never really gets into the history, so that you always think that it is white women concerned about the education of white children. But let me just say to you that if you live in a society and you have to go outside of the picket fence, and if you have to mingle in that society, you have to be concerned with what? The education of all children. Is that a fact? Why? Thank you kindly. Why? I would rather be around people who are educated and who have been orientated or indoctrinated with some kind of structure about handling themselves in a society than to be around people who have not had that instruction or that indoctrination. And I think once when we get back to understand that we have to be concerned about the whole society, because the society or the individuals in that society that you protect today will be the society that you protect for yourself in the future. And that is extremely important. When you read about homesteading, when you read about the suffragettes, when you read about the labor unions, they obviously selected pictures that would look the way they wanted people to believe that the society looked like. Yeah, my sorority, the little Delta women down in Washington, D.C., participated in the little suffragette movement. And they have their own file of pictures that was taken that were never included. Homesteading. Do you know some of the first women on the homesteading trail were Black women? I don't see many of those pictures. And I had a guy who was on my radio program who brought me a lovely book of all of these Black families who were out on the trail and on those wagons involved in the homesteading proposition. And labor unions, we have people that look like me that was involved. What we would like to see is more inclusion, not just in the feminist movement, but in society as a whole. There was an article I was reading from one woman, and this was about 1825, and she had left and gone to Arizona. She had also traveled to Kansas, moving towards the free states. She had escaped slavery, and one of the things she talked about was health care, taking better care of the poor, and upgrading the inferior education that was offered in that community for college. It is extremely important that we understand that Black women have been involved in activism for as long as they have been in this country and before they came to this country. And if you would review the documents of Dred Scott when he sued for his freedom, I'm sure Dred would have gone someplace and gone to sleep and forgot about it had there not been Harriet. It was Harriet Scott that persevered and said, not only must you be free, but I must be free, and our children must be free. So then we have to understand that at this point, we're living in a society that is changing. Unfortunately, a great number of people cannot see change until it is on their doorsteps, until it is right in front of their faces. And then they can't understand even then. And they asked with a gasp, what is happening in the world? So that we today in this society are more racially and ethnically diverse. Additionally, with new immigrants coming to America daily, speaking different languages, bringing their own folkways and mores, our population is growing older as it is growing younger. The number of married couples are decreasing. Children support is not at present where we want it to be or what it needs to be in terms of compliance. More people now are beginning to move back to the city. Housing and health care, the cost is increasing faster than the income. It is not equal to the annual wage. In 1995, 65 to 70% of the individuals own their living space, and they spend 30 or more percent just to maintain it. But at the same time, 20 years ago, it was about 18% of their annual income. Rentals are now higher than ever. Where's the cutoff? We have an increasing number of women who are below the poverty line and who are without housing. Children without education, without health benefits. Computer education is in, and computer literacy is increasing as we speak. We are moving from an industrial age to an information age, and yet we know that a great number of our people will be left behind as they were left behind in the agrarian age, with individuals not being able to produce their own food. I am just kind of annoyed from time to time that you still hear about the salary, what do you call it, the lack of equity in salaries that, with all due respects to our white male, but you read white males at the top of the scale, white women's next, black males next, black women next, and some of us fall somewhere in between. I can remember when I first went to get my job, I had gotten my terminal degree and was ready to work, wanted to make big bucks, had 6 children who ate a lot. Bought a house from attorney Bella Abza, a big sprawling brick house in Westchester, and had to pay big bucks for mortgage. And when I went there, the salary that I was offered, and I couldn't believe it. I said, I can't accept that. And I didn't have anything. I really needed to work at that time. And they increased it, you know. Had I been really trained and tutored as to how to negotiate, and that is what we need to understand, that as women, we need negotiating skills. We need to understand how to negotiate. So I accepted. I thought if I went another level, they would say no. And so I asked, because there was a guy who came in with a master's degree, and I had a terminal degree, and he was getting $4,500 more than I was getting, and I said, why did you pay him that amount of money? And they said, oh, he's head of a household. And in my orientation, I said, oh, 53% of the single-headed households are women. Women who head households need money like men who head households. And I certainly respect my brothers, regardless to ethnicity and all of the other variables. But I think women do take good care of their children, and all of those dollars go to take care of the family. So some attention needs to be directed in that area, does it not? Our lives must be a public response to abuses. We have to thank all of those women who have led the way, that have the ability to stimulate others in extraordinary ways while they still did all of the things that they were supposed to do. Let me just say that there are women who are still overrepresented in low-paying jobs. I don't know how that will be rectified. Women account for 60% of the labor force growth between 1984 and 1994, and I am sure it is much higher. Teenagers, Black and Hispanic women, still are the majority in unemployment, so that we're going to have to look at that for the future. Women represent 53% of the population. They do 3/4 of the world's work and receives about 1/3 of the pay. Why 1/3? Although we get supposedly 78% of every dollar that a male makes, I would imagine we get 1/3 primarily because all of those women who are underpaid and those women who are working part-time. That's the way someone explained it to me. But we still have a lot of work to do. We must join the women's movement and make sure that when we get to the third millennium, we will not have to address some of the same problems that we have addressed for this last 1,000 years in the second millennium. It would be sinful if we have to address the same kinds of problems in the third millennium that we have addressed for the last 1,000 years, which represent the second millennium. What is it that we must do? We must fine-tune our agenda. We must be clear on the variables that exist. We must pair solutions to needs. We must keep history correct. And for those who don't feel that it is part of their job to keep history correct, then we need, in the third millennium, an ad hoc feminist committee that sole duty is to keep the history correct. Is that a fact? Activism, okay, come on, you let it go. Activism, then, is the lifeblood in America. We are the gatekeepers. We must stay keen and on our toes, and we must be alert and sharp. Now, one of the things that the Asians deal with is yin and yang. We must make sure that the yin and the yang is in this movement because that creates balance. We must always understand that America is great because there's an allowance for redress. The efforts that I spoke about earlier, about Attorney Bella Axel, intergenerational activities, we must understand that that must be key in whatever it is we do in the future for women. Let us stay focused and let us keep the agenda continuing. Thank you.